The Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, FEB is a modern, dynamic, and welcoming campus, a place to study for the nation's future leaders. Situated in two strategic locations, Depok and Salemba, we are fully committed to contribute to the development of knowledge in economics and business, and to nurture future leaders with a sense of social responsibility and the ability to address global environmental changes. For over 65 years, we have produced the country's best graduates that will potentially play important roles both in the Indonesian government and the private sector.
So my name is Thijs Hesselmans, I'm from Blanda, and one of the many things I like about Fakultas Ekonomi and Business Universitas Indonesia is that the campus is really green. It's wonderful.
In the future, we are aiming to become Asia's leading economics and business learning center, which contributes to the development of Indonesia and the global community. FEB has three departments: the Department of Economics, the Department of Management, and the Department of Accounting, with specified courses such as With more than 65 years of experience as a prestigious educational institution in Indonesia, we have become one of the few that consistently produce the best graduates in the country. The development of FEB is not only limited in the standard degree education, but also in non-degree education, research, and consulting. Through cooperation, we always strive to provide benefits for both parties involved.
Hi, I'm Narumi Ishikawa from Japan Chiba University. Thank you for FEB to expanding my knowledge. Thank you for Universitas Indonesia. Terima kasih banyak.
Currently, there are plenty of FEB graduates who occupy key positions both in the government and private companies, local and international. The Faculty of Economics and Business University of Indonesia welcomes the entire academic community with open arms to achieve a bright and successful future together.
Part of FEB. Be part of FEB for a better future.
FEB massive campus with great people and unique local food.
Honorable Minister of Finance, the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Honorable Director of OPHI, the University of Oxford, Professor Sabina Alkire. Honorable Vice Rector, Research and Innovation of the Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Nurtami, Ph.D. Honorable Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Beta Yulianita Gitahari. Honorable Mrs. Hannah Cheraf. Honorable Mrs. Dana Iswara Basri, MA. Honorable Dr. Rahmatina Awaliyah Kasri. Honorable Dr. Putu Geniti Elnati. And respectable all the participants. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the collaborative webinar between FEB UI and OPHI Oxford University Celebrate Courageous Women with topic Multidimensional Poverty and Gender Towards a Strong and Equitable Recovery from COVID-19. Before we start the webinar, please all the participants pay attention to the housekeeping rules as follows. Now, together, we will hear the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. special afternoon. Allow me to read the agendas as follows. Opening remarks by the Vice Rector, Research and Innovation of the Universitas Indonesia. Keynote speech by the Minister of Finance, the Republic of Indonesia. Presentation by the main panelist, Director of OPHI, the University of Oxford. Main seminar stories from Inspirational Indonesian Women, Q&A session, and closing remarks by the Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Dear all participants, ladies and gentlemen, to lead the next session, I would like to invite Dr. Putu Geniki L. Nati to moderate this webinar today. For Mrs. Nikki, time is yours. Mrs. Nikki, I'm sorry, can you unmute the microphone?
Okay, so sorry. Okay, so let me start again. Thank you very much, Ibu Doti, for the introduction. Honorable panelists, guests, and friends, a very warm welcome. My name is Putu, and I am delighted to moderate this webinar organized as a collaborative effort between the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, the University of Oxford. This webinar aims to explore and highlight the importance of thinking of poverty and measuring poverty within a multidimensional framework, and to explore how this approach may serve to unravel possible inequalities with regards to how poverty is experienced by women in Indonesia, particularly in the midst of COVID-19. Importantly also, this webinar aims to remind us of the strength and courage of Ibu Kartini, without which we would not be here today. As a woman studying and working far away from home, reading Kartini's letters has always given me immense courage. It is such an honor for me to welcome and celebrate our outstanding panel of speakers today, who have dedicated their work to carrying Ibu Kartini's torch and to keeping her strength in striving for equality alive. Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani, our inspirational Minister of Finance. Dr. Nurtami, our Vice Rector, Professor Sabina Alkire, Dr. Beta Gitahari, Ibu Dana Iswara, Ibu Hana Keraf, and Dr. Rahmatina Kasli. Before we start, may I please request that questions from our distinguished audience be directed to the chat box on your screen. Participants may post questions in Bahasa Indonesia, which I will then translate for our panelists. We will have a Q&A session to address these questions at the end of the panel session. Thank you so much. We now open this webinar, and I am honored to turn to Dr. Nurtami, Ph.D. SPOFK, Vice Rector of the University of Indonesia. Dr. Nurtami is University of Indonesia's Vice Rector of Research and Innovation. Before being appointed as Vice Rector, Dr. Nurtami served as the head of the Master's Program in Dentistry at the University of Indonesia. Dr. Nurtami has published many research pieces in renowned international journals. Good afternoon, Dr. Tami. We welcome you to deliver your opening speech. Dr. Tami, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Mbak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. May peace be upon us all. Greetings of virtue. Your Excellency, Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. Your Excellency, Professor Sabina Alkire, Director of the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, Department of International Development, the University of Oxford. Distinguished speakers of this webinar, Dr. Beta Gitahari, Ibu Dana Iswara, Ibu Hana Keraf, Dr. Rahmatina, dan Dr. Putu Geniki, research colleagues from the University of Indonesia and the University of Oxford, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and friends. Good afternoon to all distinguished speakers and participants here in Indonesia, and to Professor Sabina Alkire in Bhutan. Good morning to colleagues and friends in Oxford. I hope you are all blessed with health, optimism, and hope as we start today's webinar discussion. I'm honored to welcome you all to this auspicious event and to open our discussion on celebrating courageous women, multidimensional poverty and gender, supporting Indonesia towards achieving a strong and equitable recovery from COVID-19. The aim of this webinar is to bring together experts and scientists from Indonesia and the United Kingdom to work together in order to discover innovative solutions to the challenges Indonesia is facing in the midst of COVID-19, particularly those faced by women. This webinar came to fruition through the hard work and collaboration between colleagues within the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, and Oxford University's Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. Even though we can now only meet virtually, I am deeply impressed by the strength of the collaboration and cooperation between our distinguished institutions. I hope this webinar and discussion will further cement the spirit of working together, or as we say in Japanese, gugur gunung, which means working together to achieve a good result between researchers in Indonesia and the UK to support the development of an equitable roadmap to recovery for Indonesia, where women's rights are upheld and are truly valued. As Kartini said, it is within the arms of mothers that our future is held. Distinguished colleagues and participants, COVID-19 has deprived all aspects of society. It has contributed to the volatility and disruption of Indonesian economy, leading to significant decreases in economic growth, particularly when the pandemic first hit our nation. Around 2.67 million workers have lost their livelihoods and have become unemployed. Preliminary poverty rate forecast suggests an increase in the poverty rate to up to 12.37% in Indonesia. As the pandemic unfolds, more people are falling into the clutches of poverty, more have become vulnerable, and dangers of entrenched inequality become further apparent for Indonesia. Particularly for women, COVID-19 has deeply impacted well-being. It has heightened inequalities that women have been facing daily, both within their homes and within their workplaces. Women have also been at the forefront of Indonesia's COVID-19 response. In Indonesia, women make up the majority of our healthcare professionals, community healthcare workers, and frontline workers. At home, women play crucial roles as caregivers for children, the sick, and elderly. School closures have also meant that women have taken on an increased unpaid burden while remaining breadwinners within families. Urgent action needs to be taken to support government efforts in mitigating the significant challenges, particularly those faced by women. As the pandemic has and continues to affect all aspects of life, monitoring poverty and welfare as a multifaceted phenomenon following that defined with Goal 1 of the Sustainable Development Goals of eradicating poverty in all its forms has become a crucial need for Indonesia. Because of this, innovative solutions are needed to shed light on the way multiple deprivations are experienced by the poor and vulnerable in Indonesia. This becomes even more important as these multiple deprivations are likely to have become deeper and more intense due to COVID-19. Even more so as inequality between the genders have been exacerbated by the pandemic, the ability to assess how different types of deprivation are experienced by men versus women and which deprivation affect women the most become vital. We hope that today's discussion will shed light on the multiple aspects of poverty experienced by women in Indonesia and importantly, map out possible solutions to ease women burdens. Let us work together through strong collaborations to lessen inequality and leave no one behind in Indonesia recovery process from COVID-19. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ibu Tami, for highlighting and recognizing the crucial role that women play in Indonesia, particularly in the midst of COVID-19. It is true that for Indonesia to emerge strong from this pandemic, we need both sustainable and equitable policy solutions. Dr. Tami's poignant words resonate deeply to the call for policies to leave no one behind in Indonesia's recovery process from COVID-19. Thank you very much, Ibu. Now we turn to Her Excellency, Minister Sri Mulyani. Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, or Ibu Ani, as her students affectionately call her, is an Indonesian economist who has been Minister of Finance of Indonesia since 2016. Previously, she served in the same post from 2005 to 2010. In June 2010, she was appointed as Managing Director of the World Bank Group. However, in 2016, Ibu Ani was called back by President Joko Widodo to again serve her nation as Minister of Finance. Ibu Ani has been an inspiration to many women around the world. Her strength and courage are remarkable, truly a modern-day Kartini for us all. Your Excellency Ibu Ani, the screen is yours.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning or good afternoon to all of you, honorable panelists. Professor Ari Kuncoro, Rektor of the University of Indonesia, Professor Sabina Alkire, Director Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative or OPHI, the University of Oxford, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to Fakultas Ekonomi and Business University of Indonesia and Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, Oxford University, for inviting me to deliver keynote speech this morning. The topic of this webinar is multidimensional poverty, gender disparity in Indonesia in the midst of COVID-19. It's a very timely and also the topic which is very relevant to today's situation. It is timely because in April, Indonesia celebrating Kartini Days, that is the strive and the struggle of the women to get their equal right, especially on education, in order for them to have the same or equal opportunity to promote their livelihood. Today, we are also in the midst of facing pandemic COVID-19, which for all of us, it's hitting all people globally. But according to the UN Women data, 70% of health and social workers are women. And that's why COVID-19 will affect women more than men because of the exposure of women in the health and social. They are also, in this case, women paid 11% less than men. And this will definitely have an additional dimension of this pandemic COVID-19 that is affected unevenly between men and women. We are also knows that the COVID-19 has become not only a health challenge, but this becoming social and economic, or even in this case, financial issue for many countries in the world. Indonesia as a country also doing our best in order to cope with this COVID-19 pandemic consequences. We use our fiscal tools in order for us to minimize the implication, the downside risk of this COVID-19 to the people of Indonesia. As of 2020, the result of this COVID has already contracted our economy by 2.1%. This, although this is very deep comparing to our own historical record, this is relatively mild comparing to many other countries who are also facing the same challenge as COVID-19. Our fiscal tools is critical in order for us to be able to address the issue of COVID-19, both in the health as well as non-health area. The fiscal or budget in this case provided $40.2 billion to support health activity in coping with COVID, as well as providing social support and also support for the industry, especially small and medium enterprises. For 2021, the government increasing the support to $48.23 billion in the form of economic recovery program and addressing the issue of COVID. Indonesia expecting the rebound or recovery of the economy in 2021. But this is definitely subject to the COVID situation. As we can also see in many countries in the world, they are facing the third wave that can affect their prospect of recovery in the economy. While we remain cautious on the COVID side, we are very optimistic on the economic side. The sign of the recovery is very strong, especially if we look at the PMI, that is the Production Manufacturing Index, which is increased from 51.3 in December 2020 to become 52.2 in January 2021. And this is also supported by the increasing export activity in Indonesia, with strong growth year on year has been shown in the March statistic. So the economic recovery is going to be one of the most important challenge, but at the same time also a reason for us to be optimistic. But we are all have to also understand that the COVID remain the downside risk. And that's why the discipline in implementing health protocol is going to be very critical and important. Let me now move to the gender issue in Indonesia, according to the topic of today's webinar. Indonesia is one of the fastest growing country with a younger demographic or demographic bonus, which providing us with a lot of opportunity to achieve our national goal, that is to become a fair and just, prosperous country. In realizing all the potential and achieving this goal, we need to address the issue gender equality. As shown, the UN Women Report 2016 showing that the women labor force participation has been stagnated for a decade between 1990 to 2010. Only half of women join labor force compared to more than 3/4 for men. This is not to mention that the fact women also earn 24% less than men. The World Economic Forum estimated that at the current rate of progress, it will take more than 200 years to close the overall gender gap in women labor force participation and in creating equal opportunity. We also see that providing gender equality or opportunity for the women to participate in the workforce is actually good for global economy and also for a country. McKinsey study showing that women's globally economic will lose $12 trillion by 2025 if gender inequality persists. This is a very, very significant number or amount of potential GDP globally. As of Asia Pacific, this amount is 4.5 trillion, meaning that if a country providing opportunity equal between men and women, girls and boys, then those economy will get the benefit not only in terms of all their potential can be realized, but economically, they are going to achieve a higher size of the economy. But of course, we are facing with a lot of challenge. The latest monitor report of the International Labour Organization, or ILO, projects that in a very pessimistic scenario, the world would still experience a global working hour loss of 11.9% at the end of 2020, or 340 million full-time employment jobs during the second half of 2020. This is a huge setback because of the COVID. And of course, within this situation, the figure for the most vulnerable sector, that is the informal and small and medium enterprises, are even more alarming. That is founded by the ILO. According to the ILO, the estimate of the pandemic, which impacted almost 80% of the total informal economy workers worldwide. And we also know that most of these informal economic workers dominated by women. According to McKinsey again, women's job 1.8 times more vulnerable to crisis than men's job. That's definitely have the asymmetric implication of this pandemic to women rather than men, because they are more vulnerable. So the issue of the gender dimension within the economic recovery plan is very critical. If the statistic, according to ILO, in which 40% of all employed women worldwide in the most impacted sector, this definitely will have a much bigger implication in terms of our agenda to push gender equality that will good for the society as well as the economy. And this is one of the areas that we need to take into consideration when we design the policy, not only in addressing the issue of COVID-19 implication, but also in designing the recovery process. So for Indonesia, when we are dealing and we are designing this recovery process, we bear into our mind the fact that most vulnerable position is going to be bear by the woman. So the design of social protection is focusing on who's going to receive and get the cash payment. The Family Hope Program in Indonesia is the government program to provide budget support, which is also promoting gender mainstream program. This non-cash social transfer for poor family, especially focusing the beneficiary for a woman, pregnant, mother, as well as women who overseeing their children, making sure that their children is going to get an opportunity, whether in the health and education services. Our credit for women micro enterprises is also an area that has become the issue or the focus for the Family Hope Program. Women has been highlighted in our major poverty alleviation program. The beneficiary of our social protection as well as the support for the small micro credit, they are all mostly dominated by the woman. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we also increasing the disbursement of some our social assistance, and that's definitely aiming for supporting women. The Family Hope Program, for example, has been switched the disbursement from quarterly to become monthly, which is creating a much better support for family and especially women. We also increased annual payment by 25% and expanded the program by adding 800,000 beneficiary households. These are all one of the areas that the government tried to not only coping with the negative consequence of COVID-19, but also in order for us to be able to provide or to support women which is badly affected by this pandemic COVID. we still have a long way to go for Indonesia to create an equal opportunity for women. Although we've already committed to the SDG and goals number 5, which is related with the aspiration on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. In reality, many of girls affected by this COVID or by any crisis asymmetrically comparing to the boys. This is because when the family facing hardship, it is the boys which is prioritized to get the first opportunity for education, and for a girls to be sacrificed to stay at home. And that's definitely also affecting their opportunity to make a progress in their future. So education is very critical. Health services, basic health services for all our children is very critical. For the government of Indonesia, making sure that the poor family will provide equal opportunity for boys and girls so that they are going to be able to have an equal opportunity to make progress and to improve their livelihood in the future is very critical. Our program, especially on education, health, as well as social protection, aiming to provide an equal opportunity for boys and girls, or even at the very early childhood situation or period. And that is a very critical investment for Indonesia. But again, this agenda of gender equality cannot be realized until the society and the social norm is going to also change. So for Indonesia, even though we have Kartini, which actually striving for the equal opportunity for education for girls back more than 100 years ago, we are still need to make sure that this opportunity can really be enjoyed, especially for all the young girls, that they are going to then have the same opportunity and making progress in the future. With our investment both in education, including building school, providing the internet connection, we are aiming to provide equal opportunity for all children in Indonesia. So there will be no children left behind. And most importantly, there will be no girls left behind. We do hope that this webinar is going to provide all the insight as well as the discussion, productive and constructive discussion on how a country can learn more in order for them to be able to achieve their SDG goal and national goal to provide just and fair opportunity, equal opportunity for all, and the prosperity for all. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I do hope that you are going to have a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Ani, for the very insightful overview of the COVID-19 situation in Indonesia. Thank you also for highlighting the concrete steps the government has already taken, particularly the fiscal policies which have been implemented by the Ministry of Finance to make sure that Indonesia's recovery process takes the rights of all, including women, into account. We now turn to Professor Sabina Alkire. Professor Alkire is the director of the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, a research center within the Oxford Department of International Development at the University of Oxford. Professor Alkire and fellow economist, Professor James Foster, developed the Alkire-Foster method, a method of measuring poverty in a multidimensional way, which allows us to take into account not only the number of multidimensionally poor people, however, also the intensity of their poverty. Good afternoon, Professor Alkire. The screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Nurtami, Vice Rector of the University of Indonesia, for your opening remarks. Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, the Minister of Finance, for your inspiring talk. I learned a great deal and I'm also impressed by the policies that government of Indonesia has implemented during the pandemic already. And Dr. Putu Nati, thank you for your energetic and enthusiastic moderation of this event. What Her Excellency set out was a vision of the potential disequalizing effects that the pandemic could have on women, and some ways in which those are already being ameliorated by the government of Indonesia. What I will do is share a little bit of the options that might exist for trying to make visible the current burdens that women experience, and also seeing how these decline over time. I enjoyed a great deal the title of this seminar, Courageous Women. My doctoral work in Oxford was on women's income generation projects. And I like the title because in that field work in Pakistan, I learned, first of all, how women experience multidimensional poverty, how articulate they are, how they understand the interconnections between their burdens. But I also learned very much how it is women's agency, their determination, their compassion, and their hard work that are key to overcoming poverty in all its forms and dimensions. My focal character in a set of case studies was Dadi Taja, who was a poor and destitute widow, and learning from her how she took the new business of selling flower garlands that were sold to put on the Quran Sharif, how with that money she could buy the milk, the tennis shoes for her children, and how she could teach her children to sell with a happy face and to have the right attitude about reaching out to her community. That also was a courageous journey, because the journey from poverty out of poverty not only takes work, but it also takes a transition in self-understanding and in relationships within and across families and communities. So I want to recognize that while I will mainly speak about the measurement of poverty, perhaps the most important thing, which Sri Mulyani has already indicated, is the importance of putting the power in the woman's hands. There was an interesting study by Deepa Narayan and colleagues of people who had moved out of poverty. And they found that where you would think that governments or kinship groups, family members, or NGOs or faith-based groups might be the most important reason that people cited that they moved out of poverty. Actually, when asked what was the most important contribution, most of them said it was one's own initiative that put together the various opportunities and made a path forward out of poverty. In the time post-COVID, I think that is even more the case, where people who have become unemployed, who have had to bear the care burden of other families, who have very sadly lost a loved one, who are changing their employment in a changed labor market, that their agency and their initiative is very important. And their courage will be part of the story of Indonesia's recovery from COVID. However, this presentation will mainly focus on the first aspect of how can we make visible the different overlapping deprivations that women face and how these might have changed because of the pandemic. So just a couple slides on what we mean by multidimensional measures of poverty. These are measures that in a sense take a holistic look at different challenges. And this is in a sense very much a mother's look. I love the quote about the arms of the mother, because it's looking into all the different rooms of a household, all of the different members of the household, and seeing their deprivations and recognizing that the journey out of poverty needs to canvas all of those. And so multidimensional measures start with a person, a woman, or a household, and they look at the different deprivations that are striking that person at the same time. So I have here pictures of women bearing multiple deprivation loads. and what these are vary across different countries. But what is certain is that women who were poor before COVID have perhaps an added burden after COVID, after the crisis. They already had a heavy deprivation load, and now they have the extra economic push, the extra health push, the extra relational push that they must carry. So a question is how multidimensional measures can inform responses to try to build gender equity into the COVID responses. And already I see that that path is being trod by Indonesia. But I have one slide on measurement, and I know many of you are not measurement experts and probably will be bored, but I promise you it won't last more than 10 seconds. So what you do is you take a set of indicators and you look at a person and you say, okay, is anybody in your household undernourished? Is a child out of school? Has anybody in your household completed 6 years of schooling? Do you have clean cooking fuel? Do you have nice sanitation? A good quality house? These kinds of questions. They are different in different contexts, but this is just an example, in this case taken from a global multidimensional poverty measure we do for 5.9 billion people in 107 countries. And from this, for each person, you can sum up what my deprivation score is, what Dr. Putu's deprivation score is, what your deprivation score is. For example, in this example, the colored boxes add up to 2/3 of possible deprivations that woman experienced. And if you have a critical mass of deprivations, for example, 1/3, then you will be identified as poor in a multidimensional sense. And then we can talk about the incidence, the percentage of the population who are multidimensionally poor, and also about how poor they are. And in Indonesia, there are many research exercises that have done this with multidimensional poverty measures. So I'm not going to review those. But what I want to pause today in honor of this Women's Day in Indonesia, of the example of Kartini, is to think about how these multidimensional metrics can make visible the burdens that women carry. I'd like to recognize that in the Sustainable Development Goals, there is a focus on gender built in to the definition of the first goal, ending poverty in all its forms. And of the 169 targets, the second target refers to multidimensional poverty. But it is multidimensional poverty for men, women, and children. So there is a consideration of the different experiences of poverty built in to this indicator, as well as to the indicator that countries use to report their national MPI, and over 60 countries have done so to date. So they can report the gender disaggregation, for example, of their national MPI. So how can we use the multidimensional poverty measures to advance multiple indicators related to the Sustainable Development Goals, to advance national aspirations that deprived communities have for their daughters and their wives and one another? And how do we make them more visible? So I'm talking as a person who works on measurement and tries to use measures as one tool in a much larger toolbox of policies, but a tool that allows people to see what they need to change. And there are 4 strategies we can use to make women's experiences more visible. One is to include indicators that reflect women or women versus men gendered experiences. Another is to disaggregate. A third is to analyze individual deprivations like employment or education or nutrition by gender. And the last is to build a women's MPI that is linked to the national MPI, which covers all people within a household. And so we can see some extra burdens that women may carry. So I'm just going to give examples of these 4 strategies. The first is to include gendered indicators. Now, usually we only have masculine and feminine as the genders in our household surveys. And you have to be careful as a technical person to make sure that the demographics of your households permit these kinds of exercises. But in Afghanistan, for example, 99% of households have an adult male and an adult female. And so in their national multidimensional poverty measure, they had an indicator of female schooling, where they were deprived if no woman has completed primary schooling or is literate. And they had a separate indicator if no man in the household had completed primary schooling or was literate. So this is an example of a gendered indicator, and I'll show some results from Afghanistan in a moment. A second strategy was to look at indicators that are specific to women. Many countries, for example, consider a household deprived if any woman did not have adequate prenatal or postnatal care or an assisted delivery in her last birth. So let me just show you some of what comes out. For example, in Afghanistan, 75% of people live in a household where no woman has completed primary school or is literate. And it's 47% of men. So we can see a huge gender differential. And then if we focus just on the poor, we can see to what extent poverty is made up of women's educational deprivations and men. And the men is the darker blue-green box, and the women is the lighter blue-green box within the maroon square. And you can see that women's deprivations contribute more to the national MPI. And I know you can't see it, but to the left is the provincial disaggregations. And if you studied them, you would see that some provinces had actually attained gender equity, and in others, the ratio was much worse. So you can study and you can celebrate those regions or rural urban areas or particular subgroups of the population that are moving towards gender equity. You can learn what is going right in those regions. And you can also learn how these deprivations are different across different kinds of households. For example, households where the education of the household head varies. You can also look at the size of the household or many other variables. So having gendered indicators is one strategy, very common, that can be useful in different ways if the demographics permit. The second I already mentioned, and that is if you have a national MPI, you can disaggregate it by gender. However, just like monetary poverty measures, $1.90 a day, very often if you disaggregate a household measures by gender, it shows more about demography than about the actual women, because women's and men's achievements are brought together in a household measure. Sometimes people who are interested in gender say that's wrong, that's bad measure, a household measure. But it's interesting to note that other countries see it in a positive light. For example, the government of Colombia, which launched its national MPI in 2011, said, actually, we want a household measure because we want to promote caring and sharing. We want to be able to distinguish from a household where a woman is not educated, but others in her household are, children or men, and can help her, from a household in which nobody has that kind of benefit. And so there are values of having a household measure, which gives an overall optic on an assembly of people. In some contexts, one can also disaggregate by groups like female-headed households. Now, it is naturally the case that most women will not live in female-headed households. For example, according to the Demographic and Health Survey 2017 for Indonesia, 89% of the population live in a household where the named head is a male, and less than 11% in a female-headed household. But recognizing that, when you look at the burden of female-headed households, you can see differentials. 6% of people in those households are poor, as opposed to 3.3 in other households. So you can see some kinds of inequity and think of how to support households that do not have male heads. But still, perhaps that's not getting the full picture of gendered inequalities. A third strategy, which I think, in my view, should always be used and might be the most fruitful in Indonesia, is to look at the individual deprivation indicators that are present in a multidimensional poverty measure and to gender disaggregate and analyze them. For example, education is at the individual level. So is employment. So is nutrition. So for example, coming back to Afghanistan, 16.1% of youth aged 17 to 24 were not in employment, they weren't working, they were not in education, they weren't in school, and they weren't in training. But if you look at the gender breakdown of that one single indicator, 21% of women in that age group were not in employment, education, and training, and 11% of men. We've done a study of individual indicators for children, for example, in the global MPI, looking at children who are undernourished, children who are not going to school, and children who are, in a sense, it's a mixed category. They're deprived because they live in a household where no adult has completed 6 years of schooling, but they have an opportunity because they, as a child, have. They're a pioneer in the sense that they are the first generation to have completed 6 years of schooling in their family. So for example, in South Asia, we find that across all of the countries, more girls than boys are not attending school. For example, 27% of girls are multidimensionally poor and not attending school, and only 20% of boys. But we also find some go in the other direction, where in Bangladesh, more boys are out of school than girls. Across South Asia, it is also very interesting that across the genders, there is not a statistically significant difference in undernutrition between girls and boys. And this is a historic change from a decade ago, when the girl children perhaps were more likely to be undernourished. And finally, if you look at complex combinations, which might be different for Indonesia, of course, than South Asia. But if we look at these pioneer children, we find that 1 in 8 children in South Asia are a pioneer child. And 1/4 of pioneer children are poor. And we also find that there are more girl pioneer children than boys. So what will happen in the future? How will these girl pioneer children move forward? How can we support them? These are simple questions, but they are things that measures can do and can show. And the last measurement option is to link a multidimensional measure at the national level with specific insights for women across their life cycle, from nutrition for children through to education or child labor, through to early marriage or pre or postnatal care or employment, or the burden of care of both older adults and of children and of people facing disabilities, to that indicators of domestic violence or decision-making, lacks of pensions or health insurance, other variables that are relevant post-COVID, like informal employment particularly. And you can create a fourth dimension, in a sense, or an extra dimension of women-only variables. And so every woman at the individual level has her national MPI profile, and she's identified as poor or not. But then we also see the additional gendered indicators and how she fares on them. And that can deepen our analysis in a way that is consistent and supportive of an overall multidimensional framework. So these are very specific measurement techniques in a much bigger picture, but they are one way that each of us in this call can think about our own work. My work is in measurement. Your work might be in policy, in microfinance, in empowerment, in information technology. But each of us need to think of our own professional areas and think of how today we can bring a gender lens on them. And then how not only we can bring a gender lens on them, but how we can support the women we're studying, the women we are working among, to be agents of change. Thank you all so very much for all that you do and for this wonderful exchange. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Professor Alkire, for the very, very insightful overview. Particularly in the midst of this pandemic and global recession, the MPI is and can become a fundamental tool to improve and extend the reach of policies for the poor and most vulnerable. Resonating poignantly with Sen's capability approach, the theoretical framework underlying Professor Alkire's method is Ibu Kartini's words. As Ibu Kartini would say, it is only through the freedom of being able to be educated and to live well that women can thrive and can take up their roles to help others. Jika kami bebas belajar, kami dapat berkarya. Thank you so much, Professor Alkire. We now turn to our inspirational stories from Indonesian women segment. We start this segment with Ibu Hana Kera. Hana has been my friend since junior high school at Santa Ursula Jalan Pos. I have always been in awe of her spirit and strength for women's rights since we were very young. Hana has over 8 years of experience leading grassroots programs aimed at promoting local economic development in Eastern Indonesia, particularly East Nusa Tenggara and Papua. Hana established Duanyam with her partners, and through her work, she has supported thousands of women based in East Kalimantan, East Nusa Tenggara, and Papua, among other provinces. Her work has been crucial in mitigating inequality, empowering women, and furthering local development in Indonesia. Hana is also the lead in Kreologi, a local startup working with over 15,000 small medium enterprises by providing virtual training and an integrated digital platform to support the sustainability of their businesses. Good afternoon, Hana. So nice to meet you again. We welcome you. And Hana, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Putu. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, University of Oxford, and also the Faculty of Economic and Business at the University of Indonesia for having me representing Duanyam and sharing a little bit about what we've been doing for Indonesia, working with women, Indonesian women all around Indonesia. So allow me to share my screen. Yes, so thank you, Nikki, for the introduction. So this afternoon, I would like to share a little bit about what Duanyam is. It's one of an approach of how people can actually work with women and then also empower women all around Indonesia. So Duanyam itself, we're a social enterprise. We were established in 2014. We started in the eastern part of Indonesia, in East Nusa Tenggara, and we promote three values. We empower communities, we promote culture, and we also improve livelihood. One of the approach that makes us different compared to other social initiatives, I think, is how, as a social enterprise, we try to work with market system development, how a supply chain can actually involve more women and actually make it work for increase of income for women. Since 2014, we've been working with around 1,400 women, artisan weavers all around Indonesia, and we have around 1,200 weavers actually producing and receiving income increase with us. And we've seen directly an increase of around 40% of income directly from wicker weaving production, and also higher savings from the women that received increase of income from this. So one of our expertise is actually in developing a supply chain from grassroots level and making it work, the system work for women to get involved and making the market work for them. Besides of the business itself, we also collaborate with other partners in providing social impact programs. We try to involve the ladies, the women that we work with, listening to what the needs are. I think Duanyam speaks on behalf of a very micro level, on a grassroots level in the village. So we try to get involved of the women more. And what we hear from them usually is access towards infrastructure like electricity, solar lamps, and then also small tools like glasses that they need in order for them to produce more or be more economically productive. And then also we see that in one of the districts that we work at, East Flores, there's a problem issue with stunting. So we work closely with the local government here in order to provide nutritional food by sourcing local food and then making it into a nutritional menu and then distributing it to the women that we work with. And we also hear that one of the top 3 expenditures that the women do when they receive increase of income is for their children's education. So we partner with different educational foundations in providing scholarship for the children of the weavers in hope that the additional income that they receive from weaving can go for the savings. So a little bit of Duanyam as well. We are run by women, 100% owned and led by women. Wherever we work in Indonesia, women will be one of the main beneficiaries that we work with. So the 3 of us, Ayu, Melia, and I myself, we have different backgrounds. So we complete each other. I myself with community development, and then Ayu consulting background, and then Melia from family business. And we got very enormous support from women leaders in Indonesia, from private sectors and also from government sectors. And for that, we try to be an example for other women all around Indonesia as well. So here's one of the story. Her name is Mama Miliana, and she's one of the women that works with us in Duanyam. She started with us back in 2014, one of the women that believed in the idea that the 3 of us brought. It was just an idea back then. It was just a side project back then when we were working professionally in different organizations. So Mama Mili has like any other women in East Nusa Tenggara, she inherits weaving skills from her mother, from her grandmother. She also sees there's an abundant raw material all around her place. And when she hears that there's this 3 young ladies, back then we were younger, coming in with the idea of selling weaving products for additional income, she was all for it because of that skill. So she started to weave with us. She believed in the idea, but her husband did not. When her husband saw that she started to get busy with weaving, he thinks that she was neglecting her role as women to take care of household chores, taking care of the children. So he actually threatened to burn all the weaving products. So Mama Mili herself, still believing in our idea, she still weave with us, but she did it at her neighbor's house, not in her own house, so her husband wouldn't know. And after that, after a couple of years, now she receives income from weaving, and her husband is actually very supportive with us now, and actually supporting, providing us with the raw materials. So that's one of the story that we meet on the grassroots level, on a very micro level. And that is also how we work in the grassroots level. So we saw that the 3 problems that we saw is, 1, for women especially, there's a lack of year-round cash. They work as farmers, but usually the harvest from the farming itself, they use it for eating or for traditional ceremonies. So it's very rare for them to actually generate cash from agriculture activities. Even if they can, it takes a longer time for them to actually go to the market and generating income. And then the second one is there's a lack of income options actually. With very minimum educational level, agriculture is the only option for women in Eastern Indonesia to have income increase. And then the last one we actually see is there's a lot of traditional skills inherited between women that actually have market potentials but is untapped, and there is a huge gap between the supply and demand itself. So there is where Duanyam stands. We try to work on the supply chain itself, building a system where women from village can actually sell their products all the way to today we're selling to around 10 countries. We also provide design and functional designs and also marketable designs, making sure that the products, the design of products that the community make fit into their time on a daily schedule, but also fit on the market demand. We also try to provide quality and increase of production on the village level for the women. And then we promote also, we sell directly the products, making sure there's an income increase. And then we also provide a platform for partners to collaborate with us, providing social impact products. So we hope that there's an increase of income for women that work with us by connecting the existing skill and also the market that is available domestically in Indonesia and also globally. So as today we see that with the income that the women that work with us have increased around 40%, and the top 3 expenditures that the women that work with us use the money for is to spend on nutritious food for themselves and also the children, health services or health medicines, and also education. So these are the top 3 expenditures. And then the other one that the other expenditures that the women mentioned to us as well, if they have extra cash from alternative employment, is actually they want to have savings for their children, especially for the education. So how do we do the income increase? How we provide the income increase for the women? We produce all these natural fiber-based products. They're functional, that have a very nice and very updated design as well to ensure that these products can tap into domestic and global market. We've received numerous of awards for the design products as well. And these are one of our way to ensure that there's a sustainable income for the women that we work with. We provide direct market access, not only training on the skill itself, not only increasing quality of the products, but we provide B2B wholesale market access for the women. So as a business, if Duanyam does not work with women in the grassroots level, does not have the story, then we are for sure not able to run the business sustainably. So other than providing the market access itself, as a off-taker on the grassroots level, we provide trainings year-round. We understand that there is a huge gap between the human resources in the urban areas and the rural areas. The 3 of us come from a very urban background, and it was quite a shock to start a business on village level on a very small area like East Flores district. So throughout the year, it has been our commitment to actually provide trainings, and we divide it into 4 types of trainings for the local human resources in East Flores. Mostly, we provide upskill. These are more technical skills related to the business, on weaving techniques, on how to run the system of the supply chain itself. We also provide non-technical skills for women to actually manage the business along with us, so not only us as the owner. And then we make sure that the women that work with us can become the local leaders. We've seen numerous of time where the weavers that work with us hold a position in the village government level. And then the last one, we also partner with different organizations to provide life skills. So making sure that after the receiving capacity increase, these women can actually make decisions for themselves and also for the children. And 2 key factors, if I would say, for all these trainings is 1, we have to make sure that all the programs that we make are centered with the characteristic of the daily schedules of the women. We have to also make sure that we do not only emphasize the workload on small number of women, but we diversify the risk. So we work with more women to make sure that when there's a number of women that cannot provide, we can work with the other women as well. So not only burdening these women. And then we make sure that the work with Duanyam is an alternative employment. We do not want to exercise and emphasize that more working burden for the women. And then the second one is we try to get involved with the regional government as well. Every year we have a cross-sectoral meetings, coordination with the government here in East Flores, making sure that women, especially women artisans, are involved in the policy that they take every year, and how Duanyam as a social business can support the local government here. Next, these are a couple of behavioral changes that we've seen, especially for women that work with us. We see that mostly it's about the ability and of making decisions between themselves. Now with more financial income, they are not afraid of being left alone or being dependent, financially dependent to their husbands. So these are the changes, the behavior changes that we're very proud of, and it has been the commitment for the three of us since the beginning itself. So regarding COVID-19 itself, last year, even until today, it has been a very tough time for us. I would say nobody was gonna buy handicraft products during the pandemic. So there is no way for us to actually sell the products other than joining the government's program promotion on how we can support the SMEs all around Indonesia. But last year we tried a different approach, something that was a really big lesson for us. Ever since I entered community development world back in 2012, I've only known that community development is a very high touch sector. You have to meet the community in person in order for any program to work. But last year forced us to do everything remotely. We were forced to build a supply chain remotely with the women that we work at the village in South Kalimantan. We started back in February last year, and then on March, the national government decided to close down all the flights. So at that time, we were forced to find a different strategy and adapt with the situation. So we started to do virtual trainings. We started also to use technology actually last year in order for us to have the products still produced on the community level and still to fulfill the demand from the market. So we couldn't have any team members on the ground. So we had to train and increase the capacity of the weavers themselves to become leaders of their own. For the women that we've never met in person before, everything was done through virtual meetings, online meetings. That was something new. That was something painful, but we've gone through it, and apparently it actually can work. And then I think the biggest success would be how women and digitalization is something that cannot be separated. That is the biggest lesson I think that we learned last year. And it is not something impossible. It just needs time, absolutely, and then a lot of collaboration with the local organizations that already works in the area. Duanyam didn't have any team members in Hulu Sungai Utara village in South Kalimantan. So we had to do research on the local organizations there and actually build collaboration with them. And then from that collaboration, we work with more women. So in the matter of time of around 10 months, we've produced remotely 10,500 weaving products. And we've worked with more than 210 women artisans for purun. It's a type of grass. So it's very good for Duanyam as a business itself. We could grow our portfolio catalog to offer product offering for the market, but at the same time, making sure that the community in Hulu Sungai Utara can have market access as well. So starting from never doing virtual trainings before, last year in 10 months, we've done 27 virtual trainings. And remotely as well, we've developed new product designs with the community. So the application itself that we internally use, it's not something new. It was a lesson that we learned since 2014, how painful it is to actually gather data from production on the village level, to force our women weavers to write down all the production that they've done, the capacity of production, the quality, and then having it transferred into a digital database. It took us 3 to 6 months to actually make decisions from having all these data gathered on the ground. So 2019, in the beginning of 2019, we've decided that we have to change the approach. No more pen and paper, but we have to go. We have to shorten the time for us to make decisions. So we built an internal application that is very user-friendly for women, especially those who've never ever used smartphone before. So this is also one of our program that we make sure women on the village level that has never used any smartphone, we've increased their capacity, trained them to now be more tech-savvy using the application. So this application allowed us to make real-time analysis for production, and also for us to measure the economic income impact that we've done with the communities. And last year, in order for us to survive the pandemic as well, Duanyam launched Creology. So the application is available for different SMEs, women SMEs all around Indonesia. They can use the system. The supply chain system is very simple for them to actually be more neat in managing their production, to know how to make decisions on costing as well. So that is one of our way to cope with the pandemic. And in less than a year, we've done more than 80 virtual trainings, work with almost 300 SMEs, training participants with Creology itself, and in hoping that more women can learn from our experience as women entrepreneurs as well, and how important it is not only for market access, but also as a business, as an ultra micro or micro business, we have to have very good management system internally. And here today, despite all the pandemic, we've grown bigger to the areas all around Indonesia, and we aim to work with more women all around Indonesia using the technology. So there can be more Duanyams all around Indonesia. So I guess that's a little bit of our perspective, what we've been doing in the past almost 66 years in Indonesia. Thank you.
Hannah, thank you so much. You have truly highlighted key points of action that are crucial to be considered in order to address the needs and sufferings that women face in the midst of this pandemic. So many women have benefited from your work in Duanyam. We are truly honored to celebrate your amazing work. Thank you so much, Hannah. We now turn to our next inspirational woman, Ibu Dana Iswara. Ibu Dana is a distinguished and senior former journalist. She was one of Indonesia's leading female journalists. She has won many awards for her role in furthering the world of journalism in Indonesia, particularly for women. She now dedicates herself to the empowerment of women and to the preservation of traditional Indonesian cloth and batik through her Dua Nyonya project. Ibu Dana is a pioneer for women's rights in Indonesia and continues to lead many movements which aim to further women's rights in health and education. Good afternoon, Ibu Dana. We are truly blessed to have you here with us. Ibu Dana, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Putu. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us. Good afternoon to all of you in Indonesia, and good morning to all of you in UK. I thank you, the FEB UI and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, for having me in this very inspiring and very special session for me. And I think this afternoon I'm just going to share a story of how my shop and gallery, as mentioned by Putu, its name is Dua Nyonya, tried to tried to survive the crisis since last year, because as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world so badly, as mentioned by Minister Sri Mulyani. I quoted her in one media. She said that economic problems because of the pandemic had more impact on female workers compared to male workers. This is because 40% women workers worldwide work in business sectors that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. This is such as hotel industry, restaurant industry, beauty salons, daycare, etc. And in addition to that, the data from APPBI, or the Association of Indonesian Batik Entrepreneurs and Craft People, or Asosiasi Pengusaha dan Prajin Batik Indonesia, the data shows that before the pandemic, there were about 200,000 batik artisans or craft people throughout Indonesia. And because of the pandemic, 70 to 90% of the craft people and the stakeholders lost their jobs and had to shift to other informal jobs. So back to my shop, Dua Nyonya. I had been having this shop for almost 10 years. I founded it with my partner in 2010, and since last year in March, due to the pandemic, Dua Nyonya had to stop its operation. It didn't close down, but its production as well as sales completely stopped. My employees, all of them are women, had to stay at home. And as for their salary, they only get the basic salary. So food and transport allowances must be stopped because we stopped the operation. So it lasted for almost 7 months. And in October last year, my partner and I thought that we should begin to do something, to make this situation not too harsh on my workers. So we contact our vendors, the batik craft people in Cirebon and Tasikmalaya in West Java and in Pekalongan in Central Java, and ask them to send us their products in limited amount, still in limited amount. So what we did with the batik that they sent, these vendors also lost a lot of their employees. So I think it was one way to help them to survive. And so when the batik came, we made simple, useful, and easy selling items such as facial masks, aprons, praying mats, for Muslims, using the batik, and we sold them on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, and lately we also joined one of the platform, one of the platform, and up to now, 13 months after the pandemic, Dua Nyonya has not resumed the operation in terms of opening the shop, but we sell things on the social media, and we also contact our customers individually and directly, and we sell useful and simple things to them. And I think the sales increased quite significantly in the past 2 months because Ramadan is here and people are shopping for presents. But I have to admit that sales is not looking good up to now. 60% dropped 13 months after the pandemic. And there's a question here on how we can learn from women in Indonesia on how we can survive the crisis. I think I have two answers here. One is by understanding the collective sense of crisis and solidarity among women. And two, by looking at the creativity, innovation, and breakthrough that rely heavily on electricity and digital access. I think Hannah Karaf has shown remarkable examples of how Duanyam has been doing very well in supporting women, not only during the crisis, but before that. And I think it's thanks to the creativity, innovation, and breakthrough that Duanyam has so far. So I have a story here about the collective sense of crisis and solidarity among women. That is approximately 2 weeks after the announcement of the pandemic last year in March, a friend of mine rang up and asked for remnants or the residual of batik fabrics that I had in my shop to donate them to poor women in Jakarta and in West Java. These women, these poor women, were going to be asked to make facial masks of the batik fabrics. So we all remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, masks were scarce and very expensive. So we can imagine, let alone in small towns and small villages. So what these poor women did, they were asked by my friend who contacted me, and together with women with an organization called Perempuan Tangguh Indonesia, these poor women were commissioned to make 200 masks for 1 million rupiah. So Perempuan Tangguh Indonesia members went to several parts in Jakarta and Central Java, in Bandung, Depok, Tasikmalaya, Garut, and several other cities. And they picked 38 poor people whose jobs were seamsters and seamstresses, but they were out of job because of the pandemic. So the Perempuan Tangguh or the PTI members asked them to make 200 masks, as I said, in return for 1 million rupiahs. And when the masks were ready, the masks were collected by the PTI and then were sold to public. The money they got was used to buy more fabrics and threads and other necessities. And they went to other parts of Jakarta and West Java and commissioned another group of 38 people to make masks. This continued until they reached quite a huge number of women. All of them were out of job. And I heard that with this money, these women, these poor women, used the money for buying cell phones, because now during the pandemic, students had to stay at home, and they had to use cell phones to learn with the distant learning program. So it's very sad that the money, was largely used to buy a cell phone. And I think this is also a homework for us and for the government, how to provide facilities for education during the pandemic before the students can go back to school and have offline education again. So that was one example how solidarity and collectible sense of crisis can be learned from us during the crisis. And secondly is about creativity, innovation, and breakthrough. How? I think during the first phase of the pandemic, we had in Indonesia the large-scale social distancing, or PSBB. And women who survived the crisis were those who had the creativity and innovation, those who could read what the rich or the wealthy people needed in place of their routine, expensive activities, such as shopping, traveling, going to lunch with friends, going to the malls, and etc. So these women sold things that the rich could use, could eat, could drink, could have at home without having to leave their houses. So I saw that during this period, things like foods, beverages, and house dresses, pajamas, something like that, were selling like hotcakes on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, and in the digital platforms, And because the rich, I think, needed to spend their money, and as I said, the women and the poor women were smart enough to read their needs. So this continued with selling expensive plants, fish, vintage items, collectible items, and so forth. It's becoming very easy to see how fast simple pajamas could be sold on the Instagram, for example. Because of the need maybe to spend money on the side of the, on the rich. So in other words, these women provided substitutes of expensive things and leisure activities that the rich could not possibly do during the pandemic. That is, I think, a creativity that was rich during the pandemic. But of course, there is a very crucial problem, I think, or constraint in doing this on the internet, because one thing, only those who have digital access can become sellers, on social media or on digital problems. Women in remote areas, in remote islands, for example, are out of touch. So I think here we have an issue of the so-called digital divide, or the inequality of access in digital. Up to now, we see that a lot of women do not have access to the internet, even though let's say they do have creativity and innovation to produce something that they can sell, you know, and it will become our homework as well. So how can we address this issue? I think investment in digital is very expensive, and two options that I have in mind to that question is that the government must provide infrastructure for digital connection, and two, women should collaborate with quote unquote the natives in the digital sector, you know, such as Bukalapak, Shopee, Tokopedia, and you name it, you know, other platforms. And also they can work with GoChips, Gojek, Grab, and so on to deliver their products. Why digital infrastructure is very important? I think nowadays, especially during the pandemic era, when we still need to be very, very careful with contacting with other people or with leaving homes. The connection, the internet connection, is one of the ways to survive the crisis, especially for women, as I said. And if my point, number one and number two, can be fulfilled, I think the participation of women in the labor market can be increased significantly, and thus the issue of gender gap can be addressed. As mentioned by Minister Sri Mulyani, 40% of women workers lost their job. So probably while they have to stay at home nowadays, they can do something from home by selling products and by creating many products that that are selling well in the marketplace. But also, I think this is about culture in my country and also in many other countries in the world, such as in Southeast Asia, as pointed out by Professor Alkire, that women must stay at home to look after their children, to nurture them. They should not work outside of the house. So for those women who are still confined to stay at home, digital connection is probably a key to making them free of the needs to make money, making them able to be on their own, not relying on the man in the family, for example. So I think that's my point, that also because of my experience since last year, that my dua nyonya has been doing business on social media and on the digital platform. Digital connectivity is very, very important. Also, to make women can be on their own, and that is also to overcome the issue of gender gap, to address the issue of the gender gap. So to close off my session, I think to all of women everywhere, let's not waste the crisis, because this is time when we can do something to help to expedite the recovery of the economy, because participation of women in the labor market is one thing that also the government is trying very hard, as mentioned by Minister Mulyani, is trying very hard to do. And us as society members must do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Dana, for your inspirational stories, for sharing with us all that you have done for women in Indonesia. You have truly embodied Ibu Kartini's spirit by all that you do. As Kartini would say, never give up. Janganlah lelah when you are working to help others. We now turn to our next inspirational woman, Dr. Rahmatina Kasli. Dr. Kasli is the head of the Center of Islamic Economics and Business at the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Dr. Kasli has conducted many award-winning pieces of research on the role of zakat to further economic development. Good afternoon, Dr. Kasli. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Putu. Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for all of us in Indonesia, and very good morning to all colleagues and friends in the UK and all around the world. The Excellencies Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Ibu Nurtami, Professor Alkire, and Ibu Beta, the honorable panelists, Ibu Dana Iswara dan Ibu Hana Keraf, and the honorable guests and our beloved college and students. It is a great honor for me to be among the extraordinary and inspirational women in here. Ibu Sri Mulyani, our Minister of Finance, who has inspired me in many ways since I entered the Faculty of Economics in 1998, when Indonesia was encountered with economic crisis at the time. And then Ibu Beta, our current Dean in the Faculty of Economics, Professor Alkire, who your work, I have cited many of your work, since when I'm doing my PhD thesis on the role of zakat in alleviating poverty, I studied extensively the Alkire Foster and the concepts related to multidimensional poverty. And also Ibu Dana and Mbak Hana for the inspirational stories that you have shared with us this afternoon. I'm also very happy to be here in this very wonderful occasion, celebrating women in Indonesia and also Kartini Day, celebrating women around the world. And in this occasion, I would like to share some perspective and also experience regarding how giving behavior in Indonesia might be supporting a solution to mitigate the negative impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, I would like to, okay, I can share, yeah? Can you see my screen, Putu?
Yes, Ibu.
Okay, terima kasih. Okay, so let me start by highlighting the condition that Indonesia is one of the world's most generous country. According to the World Giving Index published by Charity Aid Foundation, Indonesia is listed among 10 most generous countries over the past 10 years, where people were more likely to help a stranger or donating money or time. And indeed, in 2019, for the first time, Indonesia is ranked first in the World Giving Index. And the World Giving Index encompasses 146 countries and almost 6 billion people around the world. So Indonesia was on top of the list in 2019. In my perspective, generosity is a part of Indonesia culture. There are many traditions in Indonesia that suggest generosity is part of the culture. For example, the tradition of Moraka Bola in Bugis tribe in South Sulawesi. This is a tradition of inviting residents to volunteer together to help other residents who are about to move houses. So literally, this is moving the houses from the old location to the new location. When we go to the Java Island, there is the so-called cinnamon tradition, the embodiment of cooperation among the Javanese community, which usually happen at weddings, ceremonies, or other events in the traditions of Javanese society. In the cinnamon tradition, usually women take the leading part. The women provided the food, while the young people, they help building the tent and other preparation for the wedding ceremonies. Another good example is Marsia Lapari tradition in Mandailing in North Sumatra. This is the tradition of helping each other that often carried out during the period of planting and harvesting rice. And there are many other traditions in Indonesia that suggest generosity is a part of Indonesia culture. Manunggal Sakato in West Sumatra, and then in Toraja, there is also a culture of generosity and many more. So this is the regarding generosity. And we also believe that generosity is strongly related to religiosity of Indonesian people. Indonesia is a religious country. Around 87% of its populations are Muslim, followed by Protestant, Catholics, Hindu, and Buddha. And all these religions strongly encourage generosity and giving behavior toward others. Indeed, in Islamic teaching, Zakat and Wakaf are two Islamic economics institutions strongly encouraged or strongly directed to ensure social justice and economic justice. Zakat is basically part of the wealth taken from the rich or those whose income above the certain level that is parallel to the poverty level, and then to be given to the poor and needy. While Wakaf are the Islamic economics institution encouraged to provide the public infrastructures such as education, healthcare, religious facilities, and so on. And these are widely implemented by Indonesian Muslims. There are mosques, hospitals, and then schools built by using zakat and wakaf fund. So generosity is strongly related to religiosity of Indonesian people. Now, then come COVID-19, which spread all over the world, including in Indonesia. This is the latest data today. There are more than 141 million confirmed cases around the world, and it covers 223 countries. In Indonesia, we have a decreasing trend of COVID-19 spread, which is, alhamdulillah, this is a very good thing. And this is in line with the government efforts to do massive vaccinations. However, the cases are still high. There are more than 1,600,000 cases and more than 40,000 people pass away because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the situation today. The pandemic has resulted in negative economic growth, increasing poverty and unemployment. As has been mentioned by Ibu Sri Mulyani before, Indonesia's economic growth fell by 2.07% in 2020. The poverty rate increased from 9.22% to 10.19%, or increased from 24 million people to 27.5 million people. So this is quite a lot number. Unemployment rate also rose from 4% to more than 7%. And on top of this, women is severely impacted by the pandemic. These are some of the news. The Ministry of Women Empowerment and Children Protection mentioned that women and children are the most vulnerable because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then when we talk about business, the informal workers who are women, they are having a lot of problem, a lot of unemployment, and because 64% of Indonesia's small medium enterprises are led by women, they are the worst hit by the pandemic. And psychologically, the stress level of women is higher because of the hard economic condition. Now, this is the latest survey conducted for more than 12,000 households in 34 provinces in Indonesia, jointly collaborated by these institutions. The survey found that the impact of COVID-19 on household finance has been severe and is likely to continue in 2021. And this is in line with what has been experienced by Ibu Dana and also Mbak Hana. Yeah, the survey found that 3 in 4 face reduced income. 50% who formerly employed now move to informal jobs. 50% of the household in Indonesia have no savings to support for themselves, and 9 in 10 family business was hit. Me, myself, in our institution, Center for Islamic Economics and Business, we also experienced a lot of problem when the pandemic came. We are the youngest institutions or research center under the Faculty of Economics and Business. You can say that we are a small enterprise. There are only 10 people in us. And when the crisis came, a lot of job or a lot of work that we are planning could not be done. So it was a hard time for me as well, but we talked together. We decided to overcome this together. We decided to cut the basic salary by almost 50% and then trying to find new ways of doing business, doing consulting, and so on. And I have to say that Alhamdulillah, by the end of 2020, actually, we have a better performance compared to 2019. And this is all because of the people and in the faculty as well who supported us. And because in our center, most of them are women. So this is all because of the sacrifice of the women in our institution. And this is another finding from the survey. Gender inequalities widen as women take on more responsibilities. It is reported that more than 71% mothers are main carers supporting children with remote learning. And this is very difficult for them. A woman in Tabanan is reported to say, during the mornings, I am emotional wreck. I have to cook for the family, clean my house, wash clothes, bathe my children. And on top of this, I have to help my older child to learn online while carrying my baby. So I can really feel, what the women in Tabanan experience. I myself, I have 3 children, 1 baby, 1 in elementary school, and I never imagined in my whole life to have online learning to support my daughter to do online learning. But this is the reality, and we all try to adjust and to do the best for the children. And a recent report by UN Women shows that women's mental health was suffer a larger setback. 57% of women noting increases in stress and anxiety compared to 48% of men. So gender inequalities widen as women take on more responsibilities due to the pandemic. And these are some of beautiful pictures from comics and illustration competition, Women and COVID-19. I think they are really reflecting on the condition of women. And at the same time, although there are, sad things, but there are also good things to be, blessed, because men take more role in the household because of the pandemic. And this is something that I believe would narrow the gender inequality in the future. Now, coming back to the behavioral aspect, the COVID-19 has created a more emphatic and caring society. This is one of the mega shifts found as the impact of COVID-19. So COVID-19 pandemic has created a more empathic and caring society with a stronger social solidarity and more willingness to help others. And according to a research, more than 93% respondents make a donation in this pandemic situation. Now, I know it's almost Maghrib, yeah, I just realized it. Okay, so let me just be quick. And this is some of the giving behaviors in Indonesia. The government and other institutions have implemented various programs to address multidimensional poverty problems, such as assistance for basic needs, for education, and for healthcare. And pandemic has increased donation made and strengthened a habit to donate through digital channel. Now, we have made several research regarding the voluntary giving behavior during pandemic. One of which is this one. We did a quick survey during the pandemic, and we found that people donate due to their empathy, religious beliefs, and feeling responsibility. And there are other research in other parts of the world, but basically it gives an indication, suggested that encouraging giving behavior may be a way to mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on multidimensional poverty. And when we talk about women and giving behavior, there are quite a lot of studies suggested that girls and women more likely to engage in pro-social behaviors. Women also significantly more likely to give to charities than men. And women value benevolence more than men across all culture. And this is practice, this is evident in Indonesia. Women are more generous, more active in giving activities than men. And female respondents are twice more likely to donate than men, according to GoPay Digital Donation Outlook. And this is some of the insight from foreign policies. And the role of women actually more than in relation to giving behavior. Indeed, we have a slogan in Indonesia, Ingat pesan ibu. This is to ensure proper implementation of health protocol. And finally, as a concluding remark, I would like to say that women should be stronger, should be braver, more creative and innovative in this difficult time. Women should be more empathy, caring, and giving in this difficult time. And women should be leading to stop the pandemic in family and community healthcare, education, well-being, business and economy, and also politics. So that the role of women needs to be enhanced to achieve an equitable and sustainable recovery from COVID-19. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for the attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kasli. Because now it's Maghrib, I would like to say selamat berbuka for everyone. And also, I would like to welcome Dr. Beta Gitahari, our Dean. Dr. Gitahari is an amazing and inspirational woman. She's an amazing economist and an amazing lecturer. I welcome Dr. Gitahari to close our event today. Dr. Gitahari, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Nikki. And I know everyone is going to berbuka puasa for the fast breaking. So I'll just make this closing statement very fast. I would like to thank you to all the wonderful speakers that we have today. Of course, Ibu Sri Mulyani, our Minister of Finance of Republic of Indonesia. Thank you for her time in the midst of a very busy schedule as a minister. She provide the time for us and for her opening speech, for the keynote speech. And also we also like to thank you for Professor Sabina from Oxford University, who brought with her extensive research on the multidimensional poverty and gender. And also I would like to extend my gratitude to all the wonderful speakers, the courageous women panelists, Ibu Dana Iswara, Ibu Hana Kera, and Ibu Rahmatina. They showed us all how they make important decisions in their different roles and backgrounds and impacting others, especially women, for improving their lives and their families. A special thanks to our alumni, Putu Geniki from OPHI, University of Oxford, as the moderator and coordinator of this event, along with the committee from FEB UI that have made this possible. To all participants, thank you for attending and staying until the end of this webinar. Wishing you all the best, stay healthy, and to all that is observing the Ramadan fasting, selamat berbuka puasa. Thank you very much. See you in the next webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Ibu Beta. We now unfortunately come to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists, to all who have attended our seminar today. Thank you to the FEB UI team, Ibu Herda, Ibu Maya, Ibu Doti, Pak Tri, without which this webinar would not have come into fruition. I'd just like to say that Ibu Kartini always says, habis gelap terbitlah terang. After darkness, there is always light. Let us carry Kartini's torch together and hold the messages of hope that we have heard throughout our discussion today close to our hearts to guide Indonesia to a recovery from COVID-19 that is strong, sustainable, and equitable. Selamat berbuka puasa, everyone. I hope and wish you all health. And now I return the microphone to our amazing MC, Ibu Doti. Thank you so much. Ibu Doti, I think you are still on mute.
Thank you very much for your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Waalaikumsalam. Selamat berbuka.
Selamat berbuka. Stay healthy, everyone.
Hari Kartini.
Jakarta, Indonesia.
Selamat berbuka.
Thank you all.